Hello, Year Fours. I hope you've had a lovely half term and you've enjoyed all the beautiful sunshine we've been having. We are going to start a new book this week. We are going to read The Fastest Boy in the World by Elizabeth Laird. And this is about a boy in Ethiopia. So I wonder if when I'm finished reading, if you can go find on a map and find out where Ethiopia is. But let's get started with chapter 1. In my dreams, I'm always running. Sometimes my feet fly off the ground, and I'm sure that if I could just go a little bit faster, I'd take off and fly like an eagle. Sometimes my legs feel as heavy as tree trunks, but I know that I must go on and reach the finishing line, whatever the cost. I've been running almost since I was a toddler. As soon as I could toddle, I'd stagger after my father as fast as my little legs would take me when he set off for the market on our donkey. "Solomon, come back!" my mother would shout. I wouldn't listen, so she'd have to run after me, snatch me up, and laugh with me all the way home. That was how my childhood began, and I can remember as clearly as anything the night when everything changed. I was 11 years old. At least I think I was 11. In the countryside in Ethiopia, no one takes much notice of how old you are. It was at the end of the day, and the door of our house was firmly shut. It always made me shiver to think of the night outside, not just because it was dark and cold, but because there might be a hyena or two lurking in the darkness, or even worse, something demonish. I'll have to explain what my family home was like in case you have never been to Ethiopia. It was round, like most of the other people's houses up there in our cool highlands, and it had a thatched roof that went up to a point. There was only one room with a fire burning away in the middle. It got a bit smoky, but it kept us warm and gave a glowing light. There was a screen at one end, and our animals lived behind it, at night, that is. In the daytime, of course, they were out grazing. Anyway, that evening Ma was stirring the pot of stew that was cooking over the fire. The smell was so good it was making me feel very hungry. "How old am I, Ma?" I said suddenly. I don't know what put the idea into my head. Let me see," she said vaguely, dropping another pinch of red-hot pepper into the pot. I could tell she wasn't listening. Abba, that's what we called my father, was listening though. He had just come in from his work out on our farm. He sat down on a little stool beside the fire, and I could see he was as hungry as I was. "You were born the year the harvest was so bad, and we had to borrow all that money from your uncle," he said. Ma looked reproachfully at him. Abba blinked and looked a bit guilty. "I wasn't thinking," he said quietly. "It was Halu who was born that year." "Halu was my older brother, but he died when he was little." Ma always sighs when anyone reminds her of him. Abba shot her an understanding look, and then he scratched his head. "Oh, no, I remember now," he said. "You were born the year the magician came and turned my stick into a wand of gold." I loved it when Abba was in his teasing mood. Conjut, my little sister, had been picking up the unburnt ends of twigs and throwing them onto the fire, while twisting a bit of hair over her forehead at the same time. She only ever seems to use one hand for anything useful. The other hand is permanently fiddling with her hair. Now, though, she stopped for a whole long minute. "Oh," she said, her big brown eyes as round as the buttons on grandfather's golden jacket. "A gold wand? Where is it?" I nudged her just to show that I knew that she was being silly, and then had to pull her upright in case she toppled over into the fire. "It turned back into a stick again, just like that," Abba said, giving me a sly look. "Anyway, it wasn't that year. You were born just at the time when Twisty Horn had twins. Only they didn't turn out to be calves, but a couple of chickens. You should have seen them. They were flapping about all over the place." Everyone laughed, and even grandfather, who had been sitting on the clay bench that ran right round the wall of the house, made a sort of a rusty, wheezing sound that meant he was laughing too. But Conjut didn't even smile. She looked quite shocked. "Cows can't have chickens for babies, Abba," she said seriously. "Everyone knows that." She falls for it every time. Just at that moment a whiffling snort came from the stable behind the screen of sticks. I knew it was Twisty Horn and not Longtail or Big Hoof. I know the sound of all our animals. I can tell our donkey, her name is Lucky, from all the other donkeys at the market just by the way she brays. I know our 3 dogs too, of course, but they don't come into the house with us. Their job is to stay outside and guard our farm. They pretty much look after themselves. You're quite right, darling. Cows only have calves, said Abba, pulling Conchit sideways so that she could lean against his arm. I could tell his teasing mood was over. He was too tired for much when the evening came. He'd been working all day on the farm. Supper's ready, Ma said at last. She fetched out the big enamel tray and laid a huge round piece of pancake bread on it. Our bread is called injera, and it's soft and thin and delicious. Then she scooped spoonfuls of stew from the pot and set them out in front of each of our places. Grandfather stood up and walked over to join us by the fire. I waited expectantly. 5, I said to myself. I counted the steps he was taking, and sure enough his knees cracked like breaking sticks at the 5th step. I like doing that, guessing numbers I mean. It's a private game I play with myself and with my friend Marcos when he's in the right mood. Grandfather sat down on the little stool that Abba had pulled out for him. Solomon's 11, he said. I'd forgotten by now that I'd asked about my age. It was my job to take the bowl and the little jug of water round so that everyone could wash their hands before they ate, yet I was too hungry to think about anything but food. No one had said much while we were eating, but when we had enough, Grandfather sat back on his stool and said again, more thoughtfully this time, Solomon's 11. I thought his mind was wandering, but it wasn't. He suddenly squared his shoulders, pulled the end of his thick white shawl away from his neck as if it was too hot, and said for the 3rd time, 11. Quite old enough. We'll go tomorrow. My parents went quiet. Ma froze with her hand halfway up to her mouth. Abba had pulled his little tooth-cleaning stick from his inside pocket. He froze too. Go where? Whispered Conchit. She didn't dare speak up in front of Grandfather. I knew that she was burning to add, wherever it is, can I come too? But she would never have been so disrespectful. I was glad she'd asked the question, though, because I was burning to ask it too. To Addis Ababa, said Grandfather, as casually as he was talking about Kidami, our nearby town where I go to school and Abba goes to the market on Thursdays. There's a man I need to see. Solomon can come with me. It's time he saw something of the world, and I might need him anyway. My heart had started pumping, and my face felt as if it was on fire. Addis Ababa, our capital city! Marcos's brother had been there once. He had come home and told the most amazing stories about huge buildings with walls of glass and streets crowded with cars and everyone wearing smart clothes and suitcases that moved. I'd never been further than Kidami. It's all right, I suppose, but it's only a small town. It's got one main street which gets really muddy in the big rains. The bus comes through once a day and the cars sometimes too. It was about 5 miles to my school. I usually ran all the way there in the mornings because our teacher got furious if we were late. Then, of course, I had to run all the way home again in the afternoon. Only sometimes I walked the last bit. We weren't complete country bumpkins in Kidami. There was a shop in the main street so that if people needed anything, they could buy it between Thursdays. Thursday was market day, and you could get practically anything in the market. There was electricity in Kidami too. There was even a TV in the bar. Marcos and I used to creep up to the windows sometimes to watch it, and we usually got 5 or 10 minutes in before the barman came and shooed us away. Marcos even had electricity in his house. He could do his homework under light in the evening, unlike me. Lucky him. I had to hold my books as near as I could to the fire. I could never see them very well. They got all smudgy. If I held them too close, they even ended up a bit singed. Marcos's house was near the pump too, and there was always running water. My mother had to fetch our water in a big, heavy jar from the stream, way down the bottom of the hill every morning, with Conchit running after her, carrying her own little pot. Anyway, to get back to the story. Ma was still staring open-mouthed at Grandfather. How long will you, she said to Grandfather, looking pleadingly at him. It's a day's walk, Grandfather said. We'll start tomorrow at sunup, and we'll be there by sundown. You remember my nephew, Wandu. We'll stay 2 nights with him near Piazza. Then we'll get the bus back to Kidami the following morning. Now, no fuss, please. Solomon will be all right, and it's the school holidays at the moment, so he won't miss any lessons. I loved the way he talked, in that casual, confident way about Piazza, wherever that was, and getting the bus home. A bus! I'd never been on a bus before. Abba was looking worried. It's years and years since you were last in Addis Ababa, Father, he said. How will you find your way? It's changed so much, I hear, and walking all that distance. That's why I need Solomon, Grandfather said briskly. I'm not done yet. It's only 23 miles. I've walked a lot further than that in one day in my time. But I'd rather have company, and Solomon will do just fine. I don't remember the rest of the evening. Ma fussed about whether my shirt was clean. I only had one, apart from my school uniform. Then she worried about what we were going to eat on the journey. Grandfather didn't take any notice. He was looking pleased with himself. He stood up and went to lie down on the clay bench, folding his shawl over himself like a blanket. A minute later he was asleep. Abba nodded at me to come and sit beside him. I hadn't expected this, Solomon, he said quietly, looking down into the still glowing heart of the fire. I'd planned to take you to Addis Ababa myself one of these days. Now you be careful. Your grandfather is an old man, and Addis Ababa is a very big city. He may not remember the way too well. Don't hurry or fuss him. Let him lean on you when he gets tired. He felt inside the pocket of his tunic and brought out a little roll of tattered dollar bills. He peeled off a few of them and he put them into my hand. For emergencies, he said. If your grandfather can't find his nephew, or if something goes wrong, you've got a little bit to help you out. Only if you really need it, mind. I know I can trust you not to lose it. I had never held so much money in my hands before. I felt quite frightened of it. There are thieves in Addis, Abba went on, looking serious. He nodded to Ma, who stood up and fetched down a little pouch from the shelf above the grain bins. Abba put the money in it and showed me how to hang it around my neck and keep it tucked into my shirt. There, now mind you keep it safe, Ma said. Her forehead was creased up with worry. I knew it was me that she was anxious about more than the money, and it made me feel a bit worried too. The fire had died away to a few weak flames by the time we lay down for that night. I stared up into the dim shadows flickering around the rafters. I was too excited to sleep. What would Marco say when I told him I'd been to Addis? He'd be sick with envy. But then my stomach jumped. What if I lost sight of Grandfather in the busy streets, among all the crowds of people? What if thieves attacked me and stole my money? I'd be really, really careful, I told myself. I'll look after Grandfather really well. Then suddenly I was asleep. It's the end of chapter 1. I will see you back for chapter 2.